Today we're making a potato casserole from Sweden called Jansson's Temptation. And what makes it different from other potato gratins out there is that it uses one of the most disliked foods in all of America and one of the top 2 most hated foods. Can you guess? Anchovies. According to a Yougov survey, anchovies are right up there with liver as one of the most hated foods overall. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to try this and share it with you. Unless you're a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle or from Sweden, anchovies probably aren't something you're cooking with every week or even every month. But I trust the Swedish here, and anchovies don't make the dish taste fishy. They can melt into the background and give this whole thing a nice umami complex flavor worth trying. Plus, it has potatoes, so it's going to be good. It's a traditional Swedish dish. Jansson is a popular name in Sweden, so it's kind of like saying everyone's temptation because it's so good. Let me show you how it comes together. Start with the potatoes. I'm peeling about 1,200 grams or 2.5 pounds, and I'm using good old russet potatoes. And instead of slicing them like a typical gratin, I'm cutting them into matchsticks as best possible. There are a few ways to make matchsticks, but I found that you can fan them out and chop across and you can get some nice matchsticks, or just stack them and slice them down. I'm not aiming for perfection, just somewhere between a thinner French fry and a matchstick. Plus, I like the different sizes for the variety in the final dish. One thing I am trying for is keeping them about the same size so that they cook evenly. And one thing to keep in mind, don't rinse them after cutting. You want that starch. That's gonna help thicken the cream I'm adding later on. Okay, now for the onions. I'm slicing up 2 large onions really thinly, doing the best to get the rings. It might seem like a lot, but we're cooking them and they'll shrink down. I'm warming up a pan on medium heat and melting 2 tablespoons of butter or some oil or both. And when it's warmed up, I'm adding the onions. I've added all of them, but I really should do them in batches. I'm adding a pinch of salt to the first batch and cooking them down for 5 to 7 minutes until soft. The goal here is to cook them until they're soft. You aren't trying to brown them. And if you need to, add more oil or butter so that everything is covered, but I didn't need to. One of the biggest hoaxes in recipes is always putting 2 tablespoons and calling it a day. Sometimes you need a bit more fat to cook with, so keep that in mind. Sauteing the onions helps bring out the sweetness, which is a good contrast to the saltiness of the anchovies. Now for the cream sauce. I'm taking a bowl and pouring in 350 milliliters of heavy cream and adding to it 150 milliliters of milk. And now I'm opening up the anchovies and taking out 2 of them and chopping them up, or you can mash them if you want, and adding them to the mixture. And with that, I'm adding 1 teaspoon of the oil. That's to add flavor, but don't get too carried away. It is oil after all. And then mix that up. We aren't done with the anchovies. Now, in a small bowl, I'm putting in about 100 grams of anchovies. I'm pouring out the oil to make it a little easier to get them. And once I have them, I'm gonna rinse them off with a bit of water. You see, anchovies are really salty, like really salty. So rinsing them off helps reduce that intensity. I'm usually a big proponent of salting during the cooking process. I have been very careful not to use much salt this time around because of the anchovies. This dish actually uses ansjovis, which is actually a cured and spiced fish, not necessarily salty, but for me, anchovies are hard to find and most recipes will use regular anchovies packed in oil. Now I'm taking out a baking dish and you can spray it with oil or I'm choosing to butter it up. I want those potatoes to crisp up. I'm using a 9x13 metal pan. Just note, if you use a glass dish, you will have to adjust the cook time because glass doesn't conduct heat like metal does. I'll put notes in the description. And we layer. Start with 1/3 to half the potatoes, then half the onions, then spread out your anchovies, and then repeat. A little potatoes, more onions, and the rest of the anchovies, and then finish with potatoes on top. Once that's done, then pour the cream mixture on top of the potatoes and try your best to pour it all around, which I noticed I didn't really do a good job of. I'm going to add a little black pepper, but that's totally optional. If you want a little texture on top, you can add a couple of tablespoons or handfuls of breadcrumbs or panko. Totally optional, but something I will do in a bit. And yes, you could add cheese if you want, but that's skewing more American, and this is something unique and different, and I don't want to upset the Swedish people on YouTube, so that's totally up to you. Cover it with foil, seal it, and spin it around and pop it into the oven. I'm baking it at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 minutes. Then take the foil off, lower the heat to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and bake it for another 35 to 40 minutes. Now, this isn't totally traditional, but I found that I prefer a crunchy top. I'm all about dynamic contrast, so in the last 10 minutes, I add panko breadcrumbs on top, just a handful or two, and let that bake until the end. You're looking for potatoes that should be completely tender when you poke it with a knife. If you want it a little crispier, feel free to turn on the broiler, but keep an eye out, maybe for only 2 to 3 minutes. Since I added the panko, it will get golden brown quickly, so keep that in mind. Now that I'm done, I'm taking it out and I'm going to let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes on the stove before serving. That helps everything settle down and cool down. This is one of those dishes that doesn't sound great on paper or on a Yougov survey, but potatoes, cream, anchovies, when it comes together, it's creamy, rich, delicious, slightly sweet from the onions, and I like the complexity of the flavor mixed in with the simplicity of the Swedish potato gratin. The anchovies give it a nice punch of flavor you don't expect, and it's so good, you'll eat more than you think. But hey, I really like it. Not sure how you feel about anchovies, but give this a try, and I'll see you in the next one.